Welcome to T21Mom.
Hi, friends, and welcome to the T21Mom podcast. And this is episode 93. My name is Mary, and I'll be your host. And on today's episode, I am talking to a real firecracker of a lady. Her name is Darcy Day. And she has a pretty amazing story about her son, Brady, and how after 18 years, when he was 18, she learned that he could communicate extremely well through spelling. It is such a fascinating story. When I was hearing about her on Facebook, I thought I need to chat with this lady because it's crazy. It's just amazing, the story. So I hope you really love it. And, maybe if you have a child who is non-speaking, you might find that your child is a speller too. And you might be really amazed, just like Darcy was. So let's go have a listen. Today on the T21Mom podcast, I'm talking with Darcy Day. She has what I think is a pretty fascinating story about her son, Brady. Welcome, Darcy.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for asking me to be on this podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and some of the stories that I'm sure you'll share. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. We live in Phoenix. I have 4 kids. My oldest has Down syndrome, who's 19. And then I have he's 20, sorry. And then I have it goes by so quickly, guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a 19, a 17, and then a 7-year-old. I homeschool. I have a master's in gifted talented, and I'm a practitioner with Spelling to Communicate.
And sorry, you said you have a master's in what?
And gifted and talented, which has actually come in handy.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I'm sure we'll play a lot into what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
So a few months ago, I read about the incredible story of your son, Brady, and he's your oldest son who has Down syndrome and autism and also apraxia. Can you share for those who may not be familiar, like what is apraxia?
Yeah, it's really not talked about. I think some of us in the Down syndrome population have heard of speech apraxia, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then that's all we really know. Like the letters are hard to sound out, or combining words are hard. But really what I've learned is it's basically, in layman's terms, a brain-body disconnect. And so what that means is the brain knows what the body wants to do, but the body doesn't obey. And so that can look like pointing to letters. Like my son, I'd put out the letters and, find the G, and his pointer finger would go to the L. But he knew what the G was, but I thought it didn't, because his fine motor, and that's where apraxia really hits home, that fine motor was not operating correctly. Same with speech. So my son has, I would call him a minimal speaker, few words, but sometimes like dog might be dog. So he kind of reverses, but he's not a classic speech apraxia kid. And, I was so confused when he was younger. I'm like, well, he doesn't fit all the check boxes. So I don't know if he has it. And I went so many places to try to figure things out. But it wasn't until we got into the spelling community that, who I'm learning the most from are spellers. And I'll talk more about that. But they talk about, and my son included, about what apraxia is. And my son has spelled out that his body is unruly. It doesn't obey. And so sometimes he'll do things and he can't control his body. So apraxia is basically just a brain-body disconnect. Elizabeth Torres has done some research. So, there's no research in Down syndrome, it seems like, what I can find, but in the autism movement. And so she does talk about this in a book that she published about the micro movement, the movement sensing perspective of autism. But it does apply to kids with Down syndrome, as what I am seeing now.
Wow, yes, because I had read that it's not just apraxia of speech. Like in our community, we often just say apraxia, but apraxia of speech means it affects your speech, but it can also affect other parts of your body, essentially.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So it looks like my son getting out of the car, he'll sit in the car forever because he can't do that first motor step of getting out. So starting is really hard for apraxia, or getting a drink of water. Are you kidding me? Like that means he'd have to get off the chair. He'd have to go get so many steps in
Mm-hmm.
apraxia, right? And moving your body purposely and getting the cup and going to the fridge. And I mean, there's just so many motor steps. And that's where his breakdown is. So he's not able to fluidly do all those motor steps that are needed to get a cup of water. Or he used to run off the playground. I mean, my goodness, when he was younger, he would just, I never had friends because I always had to run after him. And I'm like, I'll meet you at the park, but not really. And I'd always just run off the playground because he couldn't stop. So inhibiting is very hard for somebody who has apraxia. So for my son, it's starting, which is getting off the couch, doing any kind of chore, starting any motor planning, or stopping. But it has nothing to do with muscle strength, by the way. It
Mm-hmm.
just has to do with the sequence of organizing your body to do a purposeful motor plan. So, and I'm telling you, we don't talk about this in the Down
Yeah.
syndrome community at all. But
Yeah.
you look around, there are so many that have apraxia. Their
So
bodies don't move. Yeah.
how old was Brady when he was diagnosed with apraxia? And was he just diagnosed with apraxia of speech or
Just speech.
apraxia?
Yeah, speech apraxia, because I went all over the country to find out why my kid couldn't talk like all these other kids. And so I went many, many places and found a speech apraxia specialist,
Mm-hmm.
and he was 9. We did 4 days a week of speech therapy, a special speech apraxia therapy. We sold our house at a loss and moved.
Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
that's the kind of family we are, right? And I mean, maybe he caught a consonant, vowel, consonant after 4 years, maybe. Like
Wow.
cat is sort of. And I mean, she's supposed to be one of the best. But now that I know about apraxia for my son, I don't think, and this sounds like I never wanted to give up on speech. I think
Mm-hmm.
because like we're always told speech, 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 speech with Down
Yeah.
syndrome. And so I mean, I pushed that for a long, long time, but his apraxia is so severe that
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he'll ever be able to articulate through speech, how you and I are talking right now. Now,
Right.
through spelling and typing, yes, but not through speech. So he
Inter-
was diagnosed, but never diagnosed of the body because they're not really teaching it in OT school, by the way. I've talked to OTs that now are savvy with the practice, and they said, we didn't really have it in our doctorate program, maybe a day. Not
Wow.
much. Yes, not much information on it. So
So,
it's,
like, basically, like, my next question was like, are there therapies that can help with this, or does it depend on how
yes,
severe it is? But it sounds like it's kind
there,
of hit and
no,
miss.
there are great, like if you find an OT that, now she may not or he may not know what purposeful motor is, but it's basically exercising. So I always tell people, find an exercise coach and start, and that's moving your body purposely. 10 squats is way different than just sitting in a chair because
Right.
that's repetitive, right?
Yeah.
Or so I always find like an exercise coach. There are some OTs, not a lot though, that really understand what does it mean to coach the body. Because a squat, like you have to tell the body what to do. If you have apraxia, it's like, what am I doing? So once they
Mm-hmm.
sit down, you have to actually coach their body parts, how to stand up, how to sit down, you don't just say stand up, like that doesn't
Right.
help. Like feel the pressure in your feet. So some OTs are savvy, but I'm finding people are having more luck with just finding a fitness coach, you
Very
know?
interesting. That's
Mm-hmm.
very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, I think your story, like when I first read about it, I thought, this is amazing. Like, I think your story can give a lot of families hope who have a child who is non-speaking. I don't like to use the word nonverbal because
Yes.
it doesn't mean that you don't have anything to say just because you can't use your voice, like your actual voice. But, for families who are really struggling with communication. And so as you've mentioned, you've discovered that Brady communicates through spelling. I mean, how cool is that? And like, how did this come about? Like, how did you discover this?
Yeah, well, I saw an interview a year and a half ago, and it was of JB and Jamie Hanley. He's an author of Underestimated and another book about ending the autism epidemic. And it was an interview of them. And the boy, who was 18 at the time, was typing to his dad saying, "Dad, thank you for getting me out of this prison of silence." And I'll never forget it, because you could tell the kid had a lot of sensory issues and was flapping. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is that? And it was something I saw that had the most profound impact on me. I could not stop thinking about it that night. So I actually got up at 2, started researching what it was, and literally signed up to be a practitioner that night, because I just thought, oh my gosh, I have 2 great friends that have kids with autism that are non-speaking, but I didn't think it was going to help Brady. But I must have had a little hope. I'm not really sure. I need to kind of reflect on that, but I haven't, because it's just been crazy since then. But anyway, so there were no practitioners in Arizona at that time. And so I went to the closest one. And here's the problem though. I'm like, my son doesn't know how to spell. There's no way my son knows how to read. And I quizzed him on his letter 2 weeks before we actually went. So I've homeschooled him, and I'm pretty sure I thought I knew what he was exposed to. And I mean, when he would point, which is fine motor, by the way, he would point about 75% incorrectly. I used to do the flashcard method. I know a lot of parents do the flashcard, and because his apraxia is so severe of a speech, I couldn't tell if he saying the word. Did he really know the word? I couldn't tell if that approximation was correct. And I made books, but again, he had to point. So everything that I saw that he demonstrated showed incompetence, right? And so I don't even know why I went. I'm telling you, because that's the biggest thing I get is when my kid can't spell, I'm like, I'm with you. I was so skeptical. And I remember being in the practitioner training, and I remember crying and saying, I don't think this is going to work for my son. Because the more I learned about it, I'm like, he can't even spell. I mean, I know my son, I've homeschooled him for 18 years. I know he can't. I've never seen him read a book. When I try to read a book, he pushes it away, and he just flips pages. He flips the pages. So there were no evidence that I could see. So took him, and then the practitioner read a little paragraph about Ben Franklin and asked him, okay, Brady, who are we talking about today? And so what is different is this doesn't use fine motor. So fine motor is really hard to coach. So that's why Brady's speech is never really quite improved. Gross motor, oh my gosh, so much easier. So it's more larger muscles. So you use the shoulder and the elbow to poke through a stencil board. And so it's using a different part of the motor system, easier to coach. And the alphabet was split into thirds. So they're big letters, big target, and you go through it with the pencil and you poke through. So at the beginning, she kind of had to help him, because it's it was a whole new motor plan, right? So you have to help coach. And I'm like, no, you should see my journal. Benjamin Franklin, I wrote out, and B is negative, she helped. E, he didn't get to that. And no, F, no, R, oh my gosh, he got to that without any help, plus. And then my journal had all these negatives. So I kind of sat back after that spelling. I'm like, no, I don't think this is going to work. And then she went on, and the more he did, the more those 45 minutes advanced, the more accurate he was becoming. And and in my journal, I started going plus, plus. No, he didn't get that. Negative, negative, plus, 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 plus. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I mean, those 45 minutes changed our life. And it does sound like a story. Stories always sound not true. And that's why it can be true. I'm saying this for anyone with Down syndrome. I know it in my gut. And for him, he was answering questions like background knowledge, what was Benjamin Franklin a diplomat in? My first thinking was, he doesn't even know what that word means. And then I know it's so terrible. And Brady's heard me tell this story, so I always have to apologize. Sorry, Brady, I'm going to show how, incompetent I was. And, he spelled the, Revolutionary War all on his own. And I'm like, what? I never taught him about that.
Wow.
And he knew vegetarians didn't eat meat. He spelled it MEAT. And he was just spelling things that were background knowledge, not even in the lesson. And that's when I kind of perked up. I'm like, wait, he knew that? And
because how would he So how was he doing it? Like, how was he spelling it? Like you were saying
So he would go
shoulder.
like me. So he would kind of, his shoulder and arm would be down. He's sitting at in a chair, and he pokes out. So his shoulder goes forward and his elbow goes forward. And so he's kind of going M and then going back,
Oh,
and then
okay.
going to the E and back and
Okay.
A and back. So he's finding the letters and hinging at the elbow and kind of not really swinging, but moving the shoulder forward. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the gross motor part. And I just remember after those 45 minutes, I looked at the practitioner and said, "Well, wait. So, so he knows how to spell." And she said, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay." And I guess he knows how to read. And she's like, "Well, yeah, you can't spell unless you can read." I mean, I'm telling you, I just couldn't believe it. And like so many questions. How did I miss this? And I was his teacher. Hello, I have a master's. I mean, none of that mattered. And when you're not looking for competence, I think like us in the Down syndrome world, we look at our kids through the Down syndrome lens, like I did. And when that stereotype is kind of overhead, we don't always see those things that really do show competence. Or, like, I think we know in our gut, I think every parent listening to this who have a kid with Down syndrome, we all can relate to this. Like, oh my gosh, they just got that. I think they totally understood what I did. You have
Mm-hmm.
that gut feeling, but then I think it's kind of fleeting because we don't know what to do. If our kids don't have a robust way to communicate, then we're like, well, okay. Like me, I kind of like pushed it under the carpet because I didn't know how to access it
Mm-hmm.
except speech, 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 speech,
Yeah.
which I did. And I'm not saying give up on speech. I would never say that. But for us, it wasn't the avenue for my son because he'll just never be articulate in the way that he does through spelling.
Wow. So at home, like, so how does he communicate? Like, does he use an iPad? Again, that's pointing, but
Yeah,
how does,
great. That's a
what does he
great
do?
question. Yeah, so not yet. So we did the lamp prolocute. We've done pretty much every device. Like the state knows us really well. Nope, that's not working. Next one. Nope. So we've gone through all of them. And he says now through spelling, through a stencil board, that those devices don't work because I had to point.
Yeah.
For one, he goes, I can't point reliably. So you remember that's different than using gross motor.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, my language isn't in a box. He would get really frustrated. And if you read Brady's story, his language is beautiful. I mean, it's not like how
Wow.
you and I talk. And so he said he would get frustrated because he wouldn't be, even if those devices he could point reliably, they just didn't work for him because it didn't have that robust language that he was wanting to communicate. Now, eventually, in spelling to communicate, these kids do get onto a keyboard, like a
Mhm.
regular keyboard.
Oh,
And
wow.
I've seen many typing two hands, even.
Wow.
And some of them can do like an iPad eventually. But see, there's no feedback on that iPad. So sensory feedback is what I'm saying. So
Okay,
that's
I
why we
see.
go, we
Yeah.
go from like a laminate board, then to a keyboard. And then after that, possibly, an iPad. But that's like the last stage because we've got to
Mhm.
myelinate all these pathways so it becomes automatic. And
Right.
that's all this is. This is coaching the motor so it becomes automatic. And so whatever
Mhm.
is practiced becomes permanent. That's good and bad, right? It's like
Right.
piano. It's basically like piano. The more you practice, the better you get at
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of the methodology behind it.
So, what was Brady's reaction to all of this, that he finally had a voice and is being heard?
You know what? It's interesting. Like the most he spells out is about getting the word out about Down syndrome. He doesn't focus on himself. It's like
Huh.
amazing
Yeah.
because I have so many questions. And the one thing we don't want to do is like bombard him with questions because parents who have done that, their kids shut down. Because you can
Yeah.
imagine, like at 18, he was closed for 18 years.
Mhm.
And you can imagine, like, you would think like, oh my gosh, isn't it great to be open? But like, it's scary. Like, that's a scary world to open yourself up and vulnerable, especially with mom, who I've been pleasing all these years. So there's many, many, many emotions tied into this communication. And so it has not been easy. And by the way, not every kid has, because I have a practice in Arizona, has taken so quickly like Brady. Brady, very fast, very, very fast. His motor's pretty good, but he's pretty apraxic. But for some reason, this resonated with him. I mean, I have some other clients that take a little bit longer, but every client's doing it. Like, all of them are showing that their language centers are fully intact. Just because somebody can't talk or doesn't look like they're comprehending does not mean that they aren't comprehending. It's just like the deaf population, right? It took a long time for the world to realize that, hey, these guys are actually pretty smart and understand everything. You know, we're hoping that the world's going to see the same thing about Down syndrome. So we're just in the beginning stages of educating people.
Because Brady also has autism, correct? Yeah. So I think this is like amazing. How was it for your mama's heart? Like, after all this time, I'm sure it was probably, I mean, ecstatic, but also maybe a little bit heartbreaking at times, thinking if you had only known, right? I mean, when you know better, you do better, obviously. But I would think as a mom, like, I would feel so guilty, like, that I couldn't. I mean, obviously I can't speak for you, but, and not that I want to make you feel that way, but I'm just wondering, like, how that was for you, because I could imagine it would be very hard.
There are, I've gone through a lot. Like, at the beginning, when he was spelling, he was just answering basic comprehension questions from the lesson that was read. So, that was like shock, disbelief, elation. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Tragedy, guilt, 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 guilt. I mean, so much guilt. And I try not to lay in that, because it can just suck you up, right?
Yeah.
And so I just really try to focus on, okay, today, what are we going to do today? And it's so weird, like, to be so excited on one and then also be hysterically crying because it's tragic, and right now, I mean, my avenues are, I go on Facebook and I'm just trying to educate people about Brady shoves me to the computer every night and he says, get one more. And I know it, because he just wants the world. He wants these people to be untrapped, and that's what they are. But the emotion, it's hard. I'm not going to lie. And I'm a practitioner, but when I'm with Brady, I'm his communication regulation partner. That's what we call it. Lots to do with regulation.
Right.
That's a big piece. And, it's hard emotionally for both of us. And, it's our favorite time of the day to be working, but it's not easy. But I can't imagine not doing it and not trying, now that I know what I know. So when people say, well, my kid can't spell or they don't read, oh, by the way my son reads is he flips pages while he's reading.
Wow.
Yeah, he just takes it all in. I know that sounds completely wacko. We don't understand so much about the brain, right? I mean, the more I learn about Brady, I'm like, ooh, those experts are all wrong, because he's had tons of assessments and we got guardianship, which we are going to be reversing. But at that time, we didn't think he could, comprehend as much as he does now. So we got guardianship and his IQ was immeasurable. Well, if you don't have an assessment that can allow the person to fully communicate, then that assessment is invalid. And there is not one assessment out there, and even not the nonverbal requires pointing, right? So no assessment is reliable for an apraxic body, for like my son's. So, and he says he's fairly good at flunking every single test that's come before him. And he has spelled that out. So he says, he goes, that's why spelling to communicate is so huge, because it's allowing him to actually show his competence, and nothing else ever has. So I want to caution your listeners, like, well, but the school said my kid's at first grade, or the school said that my child doesn't know numbers. No, I didn't think Brady knew numbers past 8, by the way, after 18. And he knows how to do multi-digit division in his head. It's shocking. How does he know? I don't know. I think he sees math in a grid. I haven't asked him because I don't want him to shut down. So I can only ask like those personal questions. I got to be careful because I don't want him just completely shutting down saying, Mom, too much. Like, stop asking me these personal questions. So I'm kind of going into it slowly and carefully, but also practicing at the same time. But anyway, our kids know way more than that all of us are presuming. And I thought about it, when you're trapped like that and your language centers are fully intact, which I believe all the people with Down syndrome, their language centers are intact. I do believe that. But what are you going to do for 18 years when you can't speak it out? You're going to probably play with so many words in your head. You're going to be thinking incredible amount, and you're just, and I think that's why my son's language is so beautiful. If you read some of his, writings, it's not like how you and I talk. And I don't know if he's doing that to show like, hey, I'm really bright. I'm not really sure, or if he's trying to prove himself, or if he really does, think in that way. Maybe all of the above. But it's just, we just have to see our kids differently, and you have to search for that competence in your child. Like, look for that. What does that look like? It may not look like what we once thought.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, Ainsley's old EA, Ronnie, who was with Ainsley for 4 years, I loved her. One day she messaged me excitedly and said, you probably already know this, but like, she goes, I can't stop shaking. But she sent me this whole list of words that Ainsley could spell, words that I didn't think she even knew. And also that discovered that she could do like simple math. I mean, she's got terrible fine motor skills. Like, she can point, but like holding a pencil is really challenging. Writing it's laborious at the best times for her. And I thought, like, she says the only time, like, I think this was grade 3 and she's grade 5 now, is when she told me this, is she said the only time that she was ever like in the class when they were doing, I guess, like math stuff was in kindergarten at circle time. I guess like when they were doing math in the class, she was probably taken out for like speech or whatever, whatever. And she said, I don't know how she learned it. So, kind of the same thing with Brady. Like, how did he learn to spell? Like, I don't know how Ainsley learned how to spell these words.
They are absorbing everything. Like, think of all the print that is around in our world. Billboards. Think of all the conversations they've heard. And I mean, they are listening all the time, and family gatherings and the TV and commercials and billboards and books laying around and mail. And I mean, there's so much in math. I'm sure she probably plays with numbers in her heads. I'm sure my son does the same thing. So, the naysayers are like, well, you have to teach them. I don't think so, because I homeschooled my son. I mean, I feel really bad, but like, I feel terrible as a homeschool mom. I don't feel I really taught him much. We focused on physical fitness and movement, which is interesting. And that was my focus with him. And so I think he's self-taught. I think many, many of our kids are, and it's very, very confusing. And I don't really care. Like, I've now seen so many spellers that I don't even question it, because they're all proving that they're cognitively intact.
That's amazing. Now, you mentioned that you spent years of Brady being in speech therapy with like little success. So what do you tell or suggest to other parents who are maybe going through something similar, like who have a child who is non-speaking and possibly has apraxia, but maybe it's undiagnosed? Like, what do you suggest to these parents?
I believe in all modalities of communication. So I would stick with a speech therapist that, in your gut, you do. Is this a good fit? Like, you have to feel, is it a good fit relationship wise?
Yeah.
There has to be that relationship between the therapist, but also I mean, of course, I'm going to say spelling to communicate because of what I've seen with my own eyes, and not just with my son. By the way, Brady's not an anomaly. There are about 25 spellers now that I've connected with Down syndrome. Lots have come through my clinic. I only see Down syndrome clients. That's my deal. And they are still, some of the parents are still pursuing speech. And actually, some kids do get better in speech, not my son, but it does create more motor pathways in the brain. My son is doing chores. I used to think he was, quote, lazy. And I did every bribery thing, but see, it's purposeful motor, doing chores and all those motor steps. So for him, oh my gosh, it's so great. Like he's doing all these chores and he's so happy and he doesn't need, bribery. So I would say, I mean, do the modalities. I mean, you can try the Dynaboxes and the Lambs. For my son, he's an unreliable pointer. Not everybody is an unreliable pointer, but I hear so often those devices don't work. It's probably because your child, and we've never heard that before, right? Unreliable pointer. What does that mean? But that's apraxia. And they probably have apraxia and they can't get that box they want. Or this is, they're thinking, this is like, no, this is I have so much more to say than this box, So, I really feel get in with the spelling to communicate, practitioner. And, I can help you find a good one too. And there's lots of resources. So, but get with that and pursue other modalities too. I never say give up on speech.
Right.
We have, just because he's now 20 and I know this is going to be the route for him, but not everybody, feels the same way.
Of course. Yeah. So to me, I think this is probably relatively new. Like people are probably not that familiar with it. Are you aware, like our speech therapists and pathologists who should understand apraxia, but like you said, many don't, or, don't have a lot of experience or knowledge with it. But do you think many are even aware of this ability to spell in our kids?
No. Spelling to communicate came out of another methodology called facilitated communication from the 1980s. And how they did that is they put pressure on the resistance on the speller's hand. And so it was deemed fake. It was smeared. And the founder her name was just like in the dirt. And she's phenomenal. And by the way, she's worked with hundreds of people with Down syndrome. She'll say the same thing. They're not cognitively delayed. And she's in Australia. I've talked to her actually. So
what's her name?
Still full-time practice, Rosemary Crossley in Australia. So, but she's facilitated communication. So people are like, oh, whenever you say that, everyone's like, oh, but no, I mean, if you do it right, you just provide resistance. But it's, we don't put hands on the kids because we don't want that to be something where people question, like, are they really spelling? Well, you're kind of touching them. So we're hands off. And then RPM came, which is rapid prompting method. And that is also using letter boards. And that's more for educational purposes. And then spelling to communicate came out of that, which is really focusing on the motor. And so that's what we do, because I feel that motor piece is so critical for our population, at least. And so what were you saying?
About, like, are people even aware, like speech pathologists?
Yeah. Speech pathologists. So there's been a statement saying that all forms of letterboarding is fake, and the Association of Hearing and Speech and Hearing Association have put it all under one category, saying that this is invalid. And I just say it right up front, because if you Google it, you're going to be like, oh, look at these people are false hope. And so they have said if any speech therapist does spelling to communicate or RPM, your license potentially could be yanked. It's a big fight.
Really?
Jamie and JB, oh yeah, there's a rebuttal. So Jamie and JB are fighting that, and 5,000 other spellers that are showing competency. You can't deny it. It's just so ridiculous.
Wow.
But it's a threat. I mean, think about it. If I'm saying what is true, like, think of all the changes that would need to happen, like billion-dollar industries for ABA and speech therapy. And although speech therapy wouldn't be out, but it would be like, the whole special ed. I mean, just so many things would have to change. So it's a big threat, to a lot of people.
But that's really sad. It's tragic. Like it's just essentially closing a door to people. Like it's just their way, they're speech pathologists. A person may not speak by using their voice. They're using other ways to communicate, like through a touch chat. Like my daughter uses that a lot. I mean, she can verbalize, but and your son is using like his spelling board. Like that's
Well, and I shared it with the speech therapist that we saw 4 days a week for 3 years. She didn't want to hear anything about it.
wow.
It was fascinating to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a miracle. I was so excited, and no, doesn't want to know about it.
Interesting.
Because they clump it into that category of, I guess, invalid and not real. But until you see it and witness it, and I really don't care about the naysayers anymore. So it's there's so many spellers now. It's going to be hard to deny
Of
that this is
course.
really,
Yeah. Now, our kids are highly visual, which I'm sure which it helps in the spelling. How can we encourage or foster spelling in our kids? Like I've tried the tile letters with Ainsley, different games, a whiteboard and so on, and it's kind of hit and miss, but how can parents maybe try this?
So how old's Ainsley?
She's 10.
She already knows how to spell. I'm just
Okay.
telling you right now.
All right. Okay. Well, she was proving that a few years ago.
Yeah,
right?
she
Like, yeah.
does. I mean, I have young clients and they're spelling 6 years old,
Wow.
and their parents have never taught them. And so how can you, I mean, it's hard because I did all those things. I did the magnetic letters, and I think it was just too easy, and maybe that's why Brady just was resistant, which looked like, to that. I made tons of books for him where he had to match the words with it was too easy, is what I'm thinking now. I don't have those answers. I mean, the best thing a parent can do right now is, number one, presume competence. What does that mean? You talk to them like an age appropriate talk. Notice the tone of voice you're using and what topics you're talking about. So if they're 10, talk about 10-year-old things, right? Right away. And also get out of your mind, like, what does competence look like? It doesn't have a look. Just like what does thinking look like? Doesn't have a look. Just like listening, by the way, doesn't have a look. My son will be in the other room and he says novel voices are difficult on his ears. So even though it's something about my pitch, I'm not novel, but he doesn't like me reading out loud to him. So I don't know how he does spelling to communicate with me, but he does. Those are kind of sweet. But when I'm reading books to him, he has to be in another room and I'll read and he'll get everything. It sounds crazy, right?
That's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, their sensory systems, a lot of times with that apraxia, that sensory system is really amped up and misfiring. And
Right.
so sounds and frequencies are
Yeah.
difficult. So you read age appropriate material. Like what? Yes. Don't read those board books anymore. They're so sick of learning about animals. I mean, read them something about Benjamin Franklin and Harriet Tubman and, all these wonderful stories, and that are 10 years old or older, however however old your child is. Yeah, but right away, age appropriate.
Okay, good. No, good note to lock up here.
Yeah, lock it up.
Now, you kind of alluded to this in our conversation. You've connected with several other parents whose child with Down syndrome are also spellers. Has their journey to this been similar to yours or quite different? Like, when are these families learning their child is a speller, and how old are they usually?
Boy, it's so different. Like, I have a gal out in LA, so we connected, and he's 5. And so they're starting at 5. There's another 6-year-old. So the younger ones are usually a little trickier. There's a 4-year-old actually too in Kentucky, and their bodies are usually harder, right? Their sensory systems and their bodies, typically what I'm seeing, are more apraxic. So these parents are doing a lot of purposeful motor, and especially doing it before spelling. All these kids know how to spell, even the 5-year-old. And
Wow.
yeah, it's incredible. And so it's going to be a little bit longer for them than it was for Brady, because their bodies appear to seem more apraxic than Brady's. I'm mentoring a 35-year-old, and his mom in Tennessee, and he's picking it up pretty quick. He doesn't have a lot of apraxia except in speech. So he's moving quickly. There's another gal in Florida that's fully open, talking to Congress, spelling out to Congress that, Down syndrome is not a cognitive disability. So she's fighting for the rights of people with Down syndrome. But I mean, the hard part is it's like this best kept secret. It feels like the secret that nobody wants to hear, right? Or they just don't want to believe it. And so it's been difficult to get the word out. But what I'm seeing is every speller is different. And I know people don't like, I know everyone's different, but no, they really are, and some need more motor coaching. Some need a lot more vision therapy is a big one, by the way. Some need more purposeful motor. Some may need more prompts. Some may need a more altered letter board, like my son. So it just depends on their vision and their apraxia. So it's all different. However, the ones who keep on it and keep doing it, the kids become open, meaning conveying their thoughts and ideas 100%.
Wow.
But you have to just stick with it. And some bodies are much harder than others, right? Like even to get a kid to sit in a chair, that can be hard.
Yeah.
If you're highly apraxic.
Wow. So what has been kind of like, I guess, your biggest surprise in all of this? Like, did you learn new things about Brady that you didn't know before, and maybe things about his personality or his likes or dislikes that you didn't know before?
Oh my gosh, like everything, right? I mean, his language. I mean, the first thing he spelled openly, he was asked, do you make New Year's resolutions? And what he spelled was, each year I resolve to not let the little things blow up into chaos. That was the first. I'm like,
wow.
Resolve? Yeah. So mature.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And, he talks about his anxiety. He has, I think, our population, a lot of our kids, they have anxiety. And the spellers who have autism say that is a huge part of autism. Like, why isn't anybody studying autism and anxiety? Because they almost all suffer from it. So my son's talked about anxiety, and he said it's a physical disability in him. And he says when frequencies like sounds go to a certain frequency, it sends electrical sparks in his spine. He calls it his hell spine. Yes. Wow. And he really is like around different sounds, he'll run or he'll go in his room. And we never knew why he did that. But now he is able to tell us. I mean, that's huge, right? Yeah. Tell us what's going on with his body. And we got a new puppy. And this has been such a challenge because the unpredictability of that puppy barking, that's going to set him into a fight or flight. Oh dear. And, So, but he's able to articulate that now, right? And his language. I mean, I don't know. I mean, his language, he's so full of grace. He's already forgiven me. I mean, I've apologized for so many little things, like, remember the time, remember the IQ test? Oh my gosh. Remember the court hearing when we got custody or guardianship? And oh gee. And he doesn't want to hear all those apologies, but I just have to for myself. I think I have to forgive myself, right?
Of course. Yeah.
But just what a beautiful heart. He is so thoughtful. He is so wanting to just help this population. I mean, lately when he spells, he just wants, one of the last things he spelled was, Down syndrome is not cognitive density. He said its disability is apraxia. And then he spelled, letterboards change everything. So game on, Down syndrome community. Wow. Because he knows, this isn't easy. Like, we have a huge message, but not everybody really wants to hear it. And you're going to have we've had a lot of naysayers, but we're just not going to be quiet. Like, we have to, share this information, and that it's not unique. Brady's not an anomaly. Like, I think if I would hear this, I would think like, oh, another one of those stories. Yeah. Because I used to think that, like, oh, Brady could only speak. Oh, he'd
Yeah.
be so much higher functioning. No, folks, it's not to do with speech. That's a whole different part of the brain. Language is all cognition. Speech is 100% motor, totally different parts of the brain.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's phenomenal. Like, I think it's amazing to
It
find
is
this
amazing.
out about, our kids. Like, until I had first seen your post, I can't remember what, I'm on a gazillion Facebook
Yeah.
pages, but I can't remember what, might have been the one, the Down syndrome and autism one, but where you were talking about that, I go, this sounds incredible. Like, because I think it just gives this whole lease of life, like a new lease on life for these
Yes.
kids and adults who,
Yes.
people had kind of maybe forgotten about, right? Or just, like, again, presumed not competent,
Right.
So I think it's like really fantastic that this has come about. Like, I think it's incredible. I think your story is one of like real hope and resilience. Like, I mean, Brady was 18 when he finally found his quote unquote voice.
Right.
So, I think it's never too late. And then you said one of your clients is 33, but yet you have kids of all ages, like 4 to and upwards. I think it's amazing.
I have a 54-year-old too,
And a
client.
54-year-old.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Oh,
Wow.
I know. It's so exciting.
It is very exciting. And especially for these people, like, it's just open, like giving them a
Yes.
whole new lease on life, like just this whole new world opening up for them that they can now participate more in, which we didn't realize they could really before.
I know. And we're so skewed by looks, right? Because you look at a person with Down syndrome and they're shuffling, some of them. I'm totally being stereotypical right now, but the ones who are at the farmer's market or at the mall shuffling along, and guys, they know what's going on. Don't judge a person by their body and what it does or does not do. That has nothing to do with comprehension and what they're thinking, feeling, and that's been the biggest takeaway for me. Like, not to really judge somebody's body. And that doesn't show competence or not competence. It has nothing to do with what they're thinking. The movie Spellers is going to be coming out.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
with JB and Jamie Hanley kind of spearheaded that, the original interview that I saw. And there is a kid in there with Down syndrome, guys. And I'm so happy. There's 8 spellers. And the kid is, I think you've had her on your show, right? So Sid's mom, I believe you've had her.
Sorry, what's the name?
Dr. Sarathe Aish.
Yes.
Yeah. So
oh,
her
is
son's
he's a speller? She never mentioned that.
Yeah. So he's a speller and he's going to be on, and seeing all these people spelling, it's like why can't it work for Down syndrome?
Right.
I mean, it basically, autism, they're saying, and there's 5,000 spellers to prove it. Autism is a physical disability, which is apraxia. And they are proving this. I mean, there's people that have been on Good Morning America now spelling that out. So hopefully the autism crowd will kind of wake up. And so, Brady and I want to kind of wake up the Down syndrome crowd and saying, us too, guys, it is apraxia. And there's other things to that, probably 21st chromosome.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we really know what all that is, but I think it has to do with the eyes, to tell you the truth. But I won't get into that. But because their vision, oh man, my clients have pretty compromised vision.
Yeah, my daughter also wears
almond thread. Yeah,
glasses. I mean, a lot of our kids do. Like, so what advice do you give to other parents who maybe are in a similar situation?
Yeah, advice is to have hope. There is hope. This is not another one of those things. This is not another miracle story. This is not another, oh, I wish my kid could do that. Like, your kid or adult child, however old, I know they can do this. I know it. I know it in every fiber of my being. And, the next step is to get plugged in with somebody in your area, or, come to Phoenix. It's beautiful right now. I do, intensives. I don't want to really plug myself on this podcast, but
Go ahead. People will want to find you. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people come from out of state to me. I do 3 or 4 day intensives. I'm the only practitioner in our world that specializes in Down syndrome. And I think it's because I have a kid with Down syndrome, but Brady is the leader of this kind of, I call it a movement.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It is, and we just want to help as many people. So whether it's coming to me or another one, and I've done immersion camps where I see clients for 5 days, twice a day, and we add in purposeful motor to that. So we do that as well. And there's just so much that can be done to help your child's body, vision, and communication. So my website's called Brand New Day. So my name is Darcy Day. So brandnewday.life. And I don't know if you put like links or whatever on your podcast.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can send you all that, but brandnewday.life. And I want to end with what Brady spelled out. And he loves spellers. Like he has a letter board. It's called a speller notebook, and he loves taking pictures with all the spellers. But the only thing missing in his book are ones that are, have Down syndrome. A lot of them are all over the nation, but like we just want to build his tribe. We have some, but most of them, this is marketed toward autism, by the way. So that may be another thing. I'm really trying to change that. And I keep messaging Jamie and JB, like, don't forget to plug Down syndrome.
Yeah.
I'm always telling them, don't just say autism.
Yeah.
So, but he said at his latest birthday celebration, there were a bunch of spellers there. He said, thank you, all my speller friends, for celebrating my birthday with me. Nothing makes me happier than seeing your faces. My inspiration to resiliently push myself has historically come from spellers like you. Rise like the sun, my friends, and let hope shine on new spellers. So that's what he wants to do. He wants these new spellers to, you guys all to have hope, because he knows that all of, this population can do it. And I know that too, now having seen it, right, with my own eyes. Yeah, that's profound, isn't it?
Incredible. And like the language, like you said, is beautiful. Like if someone had just presented that to me, I would never expect that to be from someone who has Down syndrome.
Right. And there's no way I'm influencing him, because I'm not that good of a writer. It's just his language is so beautiful.
This is very exciting, actually. And like, while we've been chatting, I'm actually going to chat with our OT and our speech path at the DSRF, the Down Syndrome Resource Foundation, about this, because I think this is incredible. And I think they'd be very interested in it. So
I have a whole slideshow I could do for them. Like we could do a Zoom, and I do that, kind of explaining what apraxia is and kind of going through Brady's journey, but weaving in, why S2C works, and through Brady's language, he kind of spells it out, and what we know from Elizabeth Torres, who's a neuroscientist who has researched apraxia.
Wow, this has been like really an eye-opening and such an enlightening conversation. I really think it's going to give a lot of parents food for thought and, something to pursue. So again, where can we find you? Like, what's your email again?
Yeah. So it's Darcy, Darcy at brandnewday.life, Life. Okay. And my website is just brandnewday.life.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing yours and Brady's really incredible and very inspiring story. I think it could be like the light bulb moment for a lot of parents, like, because who are maybe frustrated with speech, like you were, and thinking like, there's nothing left. Like, what else can I do for my child? And then there's this. So, and when does that movie Spellers come out? Because I want to go see that. I think it sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So there's a premiere, actually, the Phoenix Film Festival, I can't believe it, in my home city, is showing it at the very end of March, early April. So the last day of March, and April 1st, 2nd. So it's going to be premiering and all the spellers are going to be there. So it's going to be super exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But you can also go to Spellers the Movie.
Okay.
That's their website.
Yeah.
And you can host a showing and it gives you opportunity. I'm going to actually rent a movie theater, and it's way cheaper than you guys think to rent a movie theater. And I'm just going to market it to Down syndrome. And I'm hoping Arizona will get on board. I've heard crickets in Arizona. I don't know what it is. Like maybe because some of them know me. I'm like, I don't know. But I'm gonna host a showing, and I can't remember the dates, but it's all on their website.
Okay.
So it's Spellers the Movie, and you can see the trailer. That's the documentary about 8 spellers that takes you through their journey. And then you can host your own showing. It doesn't have to be big. You don't have to do movie theater. It could just be a couple people in your house. That would be good for your speech and OT to see, like if you could host something.
Okay. Well, we'll see what we can work, maybe we can work something out. And, but I do think they'd be very open to hearing about this. And like you said, like a lot of people just probably aren't aware.
They're just not aware.
Yeah.
They aren't. And particularly because it is marketed toward autism. And that, frankly, that's why I almost didn't do it. Because I'm like, well, but he has Down syndrome,
Right?
And I wasn't sure, but God, thank you so much that he pushed me to just try it. And even though I didn't think he could, knew his letters.
Oh, well, fantastic. So we'll certainly put the links on the site, and I look forward to the movie, and, it's very exciting. So, and maybe we'll have you on again to sort of get a little bit of an update of like where things are at. And
I would love that.
Because I think people would be interested. So thank you so much, Darcy. I really appreciate your time and sharing your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I absolutely loved this story about Darcy and Brady. I just found it so fascinating and just so amazing. I can't even imagine what that has been like for both of them, that after 18 years, that she was able to unlock that box for him and gave him a way to communicate and to express himself. I think it's absolutely fascinating and so exhilarating, and I'm sure so exciting for both of them. I just really loved this story. And I know that Darcy is just so keen on trying to get this word out about this other way that our kids can communicate, because it's not really being talked about. And I don't think a lot of people are really aware of it, but I think it's just so interesting. And I think it's just opening up this whole other door for our kids who maybe can't, they don't have language to speak, like they might be non-speaking. So I think this is a great avenue to try, because I think a lot of our kids, can really surprise us in this way. So some of my takeaways are, that we often think of apraxia, and we usually just shorten it to apraxia. Apraxia is speech, that it just affects your speech. But apraxia in itself, like in Brady's case, can affect so many other parts of your body. And, I didn't really know that until after I spoke with Darcy. So I thought that was very interesting. And number 2, just because somebody can't talk, like our kids maybe, or doesn't look like they're comprehending, or it doesn't mean that they aren't understanding what's being told to them or being said to them. And I'm sure we've all experienced that. And I can say from my own personal experience that my daughter Ainsley, she understands pretty much everything I say to her. She can't necessarily verbalize it, but she certainly understands everything I say to her. And I always have to tell people, especially the people that she works with, that that's the case, because I sometimes think they underestimate her. Actually, I'm quite sure they underestimate her a lot of the time. That number 3, spelling to communicate is so huge, because it's allowing people like Brady to actually show their competency, and nothing else ever has. They can show their understanding, and that they know what's going on, and that they are able to communicate. I think it's just amazing. Number 4, that our kids, I'm sure you can all agree on this, that our kids know way more than many of us presume. And, never, ever underestimate our kids, because I think they know way, way more than maybe even we as parents sometimes give them credit for. Number 5, that you have to search for that competence in your child. Like, what does that look like? It may not look like what we once thought, but we have to presume competence. And I think it's also important that we educate the people that are working with our kids that they also have to presume competency in our kids. Number 6, Darcy said she has seen so many spellers that she doesn't even question it now. That this isn't a fluke, that this is really happening. And it's also proving that these kids are cognitively intact. I was so amazed when she talked about that. And people don't know this. So, I think we really need to work on getting this word out, especially for those of us who have kids who have limited actual speech that maybe are non-speaking. I think this is really important. And number 7, that this whole spelling, I want to say phenomena, it kind of feels like this secret that nobody really wants to hear about, that they just don't want to believe it. And, I was really kind of sad to hear that when Darcy was talking about it, that, some speech paths and OTs, may not be permitted to really accept this method of communication, the spelling, because they could have their license yanked. And I think that is just so, so wrong. So I think we really have to push for this, that this is another way that our kids can communicate. And number 8, that what Brady said, he said that letterboards change everything. So game on, Down syndrome community. And I love that, because yes, game on. Let's show everybody, let's show our kids who are non-speaking that, they have something to say. It might not how we traditionally want them to be able to say it, but they have something to say. And I think spelling is another avenue for our kids to communicate. There are so many ways to communicate, and this is another avenue that's opening up that box for so many kids. And I just absolutely love this episode. You can find Darcy Day on Facebook, and we'll put the links in the show notes as well, so that if you want to contact her, that you can, because I'm sure she would love to get in touch with you and assist you in any way that she can. Thanks for listening to the T21Mom podcast. And as always, I would love to hear from you. I really would. You can drop me a line by email at info@t21mom.com, or you can find me on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter at trisomy21mama. And it would really mean a lot if you would subscribe and leave a little review, so that we could be more searchable for others in the Down syndrome community. Tell me your stories. What's going on in your life? What are your wins for your kids? I want to hear about it. I want to know what stories you want to hear and what interests you. So keep on loving on your rockin' kiddos, and we will see you next time.